Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cloud Adoption Framework. And this is our efforts to understand it as much as we can. As I have already mentioned a couple of times, it's a huge documentation, and you can go that particular section that you're trying to understand. Uh, in this video, we are going to talk about the adopt phase right here. We have talked about strategy, plan, ready, and adopt. So let's take it here and start talking about the adopt phase. Well, we have already seen assessment and discovery during our planning phase. Ready is all about taking care of the destination, and adopt is all about migration, or rather adopting cloud. So earlier in this video series, or in migration playlist of this channel, we described the various strategies, or the R strategies, that you can use for migration. Progressing from rehosting your apps to refactoring and re-architecting or rebuilding, and finally to the modernization. These are like 5R strategies. In many cases, organizations will start with lift and shift to drive rapid migration and early cost savings. There are various challenges by which cloud adoption starts. Exiting out of the data center is one of them, and whenever it is time constraint exiting from the DC, it is always lift and shift because there is no time to innovate. So let's focus on the rehost strategy, moving applications running on traditional servers and VMs to Azure IS. Rehost requires no change in the app. It will just pick from the on-prem and put it there in the destination. You need not even create the virtual machine, right? Because the migration tool like Azure Migrate, or there are so many third-party tools like River, Meadow, Cloudscape, they will do the image-based migration. They will just copy the entire VM from the on-premises and put it there in the Azure where you want it to be, like inside the virtual network, inside some particular subnet. So it would be as it is, right? There is no changes. It simply means hardware, and it simply means your workload is running as it is on the Azure virtual machine. Nothing has changed except the virtual network where it is running. There are things that you need to think about though. So we have covered almost everything in the migration playlist. If you would like to check that out, you can check that out. But here we are just focusing on cloud adoption framework phases to understand, and this is adopt phase. So begin the migration waves. With your first workload to Azure, you should become familiar with the tools and approaches needed to scale adoption efforts. It is more like you have to first choose which application you would like to move first, because organizations are moving first time on the cloud, right? So they choose the application which is not more complex, which doesn't have so many dependencies, but of course the usage is high so that they can match the performance. So you will move your first, or you will create your first waves with that application which is less complex, less business critical, and with less dependencies. Similarly, we go to the complex application and so many dependencies, and we will utilize our learning from first application or the first wave in the second wave, because as we start migrating, we are getting familiar with the cloud, and our skill set is getting developed, and we can use that in migrating the complex applications. That's all we are trying to say here. And as I mentioned, the tool Azure Migrate is one of the best tool for the migration. It is a central hub to discover, assess, and migrate workloads to Azure. It's not only Migrate, but it will help you to discover and assess as well. All right, so even in Azure Migrate, you have different tools like App Service Migration or DMS, Data Migration Assistant, DM, Data Migration Service that can help you to migrate that particular workloads. And there are so many third-party tools as well. So let's start with next step, which is replication. What we need to do, I should have moved this card here. We are keeping in mind the rehost strategy. So let's initiate the adopt phase by replicating. So initiate process by replication. Replication is the first step of the migrate phase where you migrate on-premises VM by copying them across to Azure. Asynchronous or synchronous replication ensures that live systems can be copied to Azure with no downtime. Yes, that's the beauty. The replication will keep the servers fully in sync with on-premises versions until you are ready to migrate or retire the on-premises. What I mean to say is like until final cut over happens and your requests are coming to the cloud infrastructure rather than on-premises. So pulling in data and insights from assessment, we're talking about Azure Migrate here. As I said, it also helps in discovering an assessment. So Azure Migrate can configure each VM to replicate to the correct VM instance in Azure. It is more like we usually have over-provisioned VMs on premises, but with the performance or the historical data, Azure Migrate can help you find out the correct instance on the Azure and start save money from the very first day. Now, there is something very interesting, which is application-aware replication. Yes, Azure Migrate can do application-aware replication, which helps you, which ease your migration, right? Understanding what the application is and how it is working and taking it to the cloud or Azure as it is, so that the application start working on the cloud itself is a great capabilities. You can automatically use this feature for commonly used Microsoft Enterprise applications such as SharePoint, Dynamics, SQL Server, Active Directory. Plus, there are third-party vendors app like Oracle, SAP, IBM, and Red Hat. There are so many, which is mentioned even in the documentation. So that's about the replication. Then it's about once your VMs are replicated completely, then you just do not go ahead and start working on the cloud. You do the test migration first, okay, before final cutover. So the next step is in the adopt phase is testing, which ensures system health before final cutover and that migration will work as expected. Test migration simulates the migration by creating an Azure VM using replicated data. Testing doesn't affect the on-premises machine, which is very important, which remain functional, operational, and most important, continue replicating. You can use the replicated test Azure VM to validate the migration, perform app testing, and address any issue before full migration. And to establish that workloads function as expected, you might want to test migrated resources in the isolated partitions in Azure. With Azure Migrate, you can fully test a set of VMs in an isolated environment without affecting the on-premises, as I said. So once the test migration is done, it's time to cut over. And after you have verified that the migration works as expected through testing, it's time where you will plan the cutover. Well, I have seen organizations planning bulk cutover, like for all the workloads in one go. Not recommended at all. But as per the waves we talked about in the first phase, we should go. Keep planning cutover, keep moving the workloads to the Azure and shutting down the on-premises. Azure Migrate can also perform the final launch in your cloud and turn off the on-premises applications as well. In some cases, you will have to update DNS records for the new cloud-based workloads. However, if you migrated using DNS in the cloud as part of your initial environment setup, this might happen automatically, right? Then, as I've already mentioned briefly, decommissioning. So once the cutover is done, then of course you need to think about all those machines which are running on premises, and you need to decommission those, turning off the power to the asset and disposing the asset responsibly. Decommissioning is an important step when cost savings are your primary motivation for a migration, right? So decommission, then at the end, we come up with innovation. That's how it is going, all the steps one by one. So now that you are in the cloud, you have migrated your application workloads to the Azure, you have a chance to unlock and expand business capabilities through cloud adoption related innovation. By developing a new innovative solution, you can modernize existing apps or create new solutions for your core business processes, ultimately driving business value. That is the whole purpose of this framework or cloud adoption business value. That's what we discussed in the strategy phase, the first one, the initiation of CAF. Well, thank you for watching and you have a good day. In next video, we'll try to complete, govern, and manage. We are planning to start the 305 hopefully soon. Thank you.